You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. Today in the studio, a snake expert and snakes in the studio. We have Terry Vandeventer, herpetologist, with us on the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast.
Mississippi Outdoors is sponsored by Entergy Mississippi. Entergy is building a stronger and cleaner grid to power a brighter future and protect our great outdoors for generations to come.
You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. And today with us, Terry Vandeventer. Did I say it correctly,
You said
Terry?
it exactly right.
Herpetologist and expert on many things, including what's on your hat right there.
Good old Mississippi snakes.
Good old Mississippi snakes. Terry,
Yeah.
welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. These are part of my life. I do these all the time. So yeah.
I figured that answering questions about Mississippi snakes would be not much of a challenge. You've answered a lot of questions over the years, over the course of your career about Mississippi snakes, haven't you?
Sure. I came to Illinois. Pardon me. I came to Mississippi from Illinois in 1976 to take a position at the Jackson Zoo. And I revamped the reptile department there. I was at Southern Illinois University and got a letter one day. How would you like to come to Mississippi? And I did, and stayed there for a while. And then I went into my own business, which was live programs. And I would go around to wildlife shows, hunting, fishing, outdoor extravaganzas, schools, libraries, a lot of medical EMT groups and things. And I'd talk to them about snakes, what snakes are really all about. Not necessarily what your uncle told you, but what they're really all about. And I did that for 45 years.
Wow.
And that was the longest running program of its kind ever in the United States. And so I retired from that. And now people think I'm retired and they never call me anymore, So I'm retired from being on stage.
Okay.
But I'm still engaged in herpetology, just like I always have. I'm a field associate in herpetology at our State Natural Science Museum, a branch of Wildlife Fisheries and Parks. And I've done contract work through them and have lectured for them at their various events for many, many years. I've seen 3 directors go in that period of time. And now we have Angel over there. Mm-hmm. And so a great resource. And I have a lot of friends over there. But I'm still engaged in herpetology. I mean, I drive down the road. If there's a banana peel, I hit the brakes. If there's a fan belt in the road, I hit the brakes. The grand youngin is 7, and he knows when he sees a snake at the house, you take 2 steps back and walk away. Mm-hmm. And he's known that since he was 2 when he found his first snake on the property. Wow. And I was so proud when he stood up and whispered, 1, 2, as he stepped back with me. And but like I may have mentioned prior to our starting up here, that it's been a little bit of an uphill battle because I like snakes. I think snakes are cool. They're beautiful. They're resplendent in color. They rival tropical fish and tropical birds, and they're just greatly misunderstood. Yeah, and they're greatly feared.
I was going to say that. So you mean to tell me that there are misconceptions about snakes?
A couple,
venomous?
A couple, yeah.
There's the understatement of the episode, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so. Most people, when they, I'll go in a convenience store and somebody will point and say, you're him. And I go, yeah, did I run over your dog? You're the snake guy. And I said, well, according to all the kids in Mississippi, I'm the snake dude.
Yeah,
So,
that's great.
But yeah, that's what I do. It's what I've done since I was 4 years old, and I'm 72 and I'm going just as strong as ever.
That's great.
So, yep.
Terry, it says here, when you were 4 years old, it says here you were growing up in the, what was it? The Great Corn Desert of East Central Illinois?
That's correct. You could virtually look out my bedroom window and see Chicago 4 hours away. Yeah. So, it was where the Wisconsin Glacier wiped all the hills away from northern Illinois or northern central Illinois, and it became tall grass prairie. And then, of course, later the prairie was plowed up and turned into agricultural land. Mm. And since it basically supports only corn or only beans, by its very definition, it's a desert. So we say it kind of tongue in cheek, but
Sure.
as a young lad growing up with a bicycle, I could find snakes. I knew where to find them, and I read everything about them. And back in the day, you licked a stamp and you wrote letters to other people around the United States who shared your interests. And there was probably 100 of us back then. And now, gosh, you carry all that information in your phone,
Sure.
So, lots of people.
That interest in snakes and other creepy crawlies, was it natural? Where'd that come from for you?
Yeah. I was never afraid. I was never afraid. As a little boy, I just, roly-polies and frogs in the yard, little kids, little boys, little girls too.
Yeah.
We don't want to, leave them out because there are a lot of women scientists and a lot of female herpetologists and reptile enthusiasts for sure. But it's always been said that the fear of snakes is a learned fear, that babies aren't born afraid, that someone older who loves them is going to teach them, don't bother that. That's bad. Come tell mommy and we'll kill it or we'll run away. Well, we're looking at it differently now, and we're beginning to realize that those people who said, I guess I just have a natural born fear of snakes, maybe they're not so much off base. We're beginning to realize that maybe back in these dusty halls of our brain that there's something there that goes way, way back that says, don't pick that up. Mm-hmm. Leave that alone. And maybe to a cave dweller in France, 20,000 years ago, he knew what death was. He'd seen cave bears beat people up and he'd seen people die. He knew what death looked like. But a snake is a little brightly colored twig, and you go walking by and that little twig scratches you on the foot. It's nothing. Mm-hmm. And then comes swelling and pain and maybe even death. And that's magical. And that could be part of our genetic memory. So I've seen tiny children, 2 years old, couldn't even talk, scream and run in sheer terror at the sight of a tiny snake. And by the same token, I've seen many of the same children reaching out, wanting to hold it. So it's a kind of a complex thing. I'm not a psychologist, but it's something we've been looking at. We find that children can identify snakes on a scene that has bunnies and flowers and the sun with a smiley face, and all through there, that they can see a snake in microseconds. They can spot it, and using computers and lasers in the eyes and things, they can spot this really, really fast, while their parents sitting there with them never see it.
Wow.
And so, and also the same thing with spiders and snakes, right?
Right.
Spiders and snakes. And one of my friends, who's one of the top snake authorities on the planet, is arachnophobic.
Really?
Very afraid of spiders.
Isn't that something?
He'll do, he'll walk into a web and he'll get, 5 days of cardio in 5 seconds.
That's a good way to put it.
So, yeah.
And we've all been there. You walk into the web and 5 days of cardio in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Now, that's a great
And
one.
in the Amazon, you walk into a web and it'll bounce you back.
Really? It's a different kind of web.
Yeah, they have real spiders and real snakes in the Amazon. So.
Okay, so what about here at home in Mississippi in terms of, and this may almost be such a broad question, it's unfair, but in terms of the kind of snakes we have here overall and how that compares to other states and other regions, Illinois.
Yeah.
What's our snake population?
We've got about 56 different kinds of snakes.
Okay.
56 different kinds. And 6 are venomous.
6 of the 56.
6 of them are venomous.
Okay.
So all the rest of them are utterly harmless. We have about 125 on average venomous snake bites per year. Okay. No fatalities.
Okay.
We hear about them, and here's one of those uphill battles I tell you about. We hear about them. My Uncle Bob got bit by a rattlesnake and died. Well, when we check on it, or even when we look at newspaper articles and obituaries, well, Uncle Bob's dead, but it doesn't seem he died of a snake bite, and so, the Mississippi Poison Control Center, checks on those things and such. And it seems so funny that people dearly want to know someone who died of a snake bite, but we haven't had a snake bite fatality in like 75 years in Mississippi. We've had some close calls for sure, but in Mississippi, well, in the United States, we have relatively good snake bite care. Most all hospitals stock antivenin, and if you and a venomous snake bite isn't necessarily fatal, even without treatment. It's not necessarily fatal. Copperheads, there are some authorities that believe there's never been a copperhead fatality ever recorded in the world. But others say there have, and I don't doubt it. But it's not all venomous snake bites are medical emergencies and you should always seek medical attention, but they're not necessarily life and death, situations. So, so we have lots of snakes, and we have Mississippi is a tall state north to south. We have Appalachian Mountains in the north. We have the Delta, which is low country. A couple of cottonmouths live in the Delta, and then we go all the way down to the piney woods, the longleaf pine woods, where the big eastern diamondbacks live, and then we have the Gulf Coast with Barrier Island. So since it's such a long state, we have differences in temperature, we have differences in habitat, and we have room for all kinds of snakes to live here.
Yeah.
So,
so within the state and those different regions and areas that you mentioned, is there one part of the state that is a little more snake heavy than other? Yeah, snaky. That's the word.
Oh, I don't know. The Delta, even though the Delta is highly agricultural, the expansive hardwoods, disappeared, a couple centuries ago when they, but when my wife and I, now my wife she thinks snakes are just fine. She doesn't pick them up. She goes with me and we find snakes together. But when we go up to the Delta in the springtime, we look for old barns that have the tin blown off the roof and such. And there's cases there that if you're a snakeophobic, to go with us, it would be a horror for you because we know places we'll turn a piece of tin, there'll be 20 big snakes under it, so for people who enjoy that kind of thing, I'm in heaven for sure. And we get a lot of data too. We get a lot of data that way. But the Delta is a fun place for someone of my ilk to go. The piney woods of Camp Shelby, the longleaf pine woods south of Hattiesburg and all through that area, doesn't necessarily have a lot of. It's hard to tell. How do you estimate how many snakes are there?
Yeah.
I mean, but you may go there and not find a lot of snakes, but when you do find something, it's usually kind of cool. The big indigo snake disappeared in 1935. We haven't seen an indigo snake, largest snake in America. And the black pine snake, protected by Mississippi state law and also by federal state law, in nearly 50 years in Mississippi, I've seen 5 or 6 dead on the road, and I've caught 2. And they're being studied at Camp Shelby. That's a Mississippi jewel. They're found in one parish in Louisiana and a couple of counties in Alabama, and the rest of the ranges in Mississippi. Mississippi state snake.
Wow.
I think we ought to have. That's what I always told the children. We have to have Mississippi snake. Yeah. Mississippi state snake.
We have a state. Everything else. Then,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So for me to go down to one of our wildlife management areas, Leaf River. I love Leaf River. Yeah. I've caught coral snakes in Leaf River. I've caught eastern diamondbacks. And when I say caught, I don't mean captured and removed. I've found, photographed, that kind of thing. Sometimes specimens are taken for various data or something like that, and then generally returned to exactly where they were found. But a rattlesnake day is a good day for me.
What about the timber rattler?
Well, timber rattlers are native all over Mississippi, except on the Gulf Coast. Okay. Now they do come down the Pearl and they do come down the Pascagoula. They like those river bottoms, but around Hattiesburg, Camp Shelby area, for example, they're replaced by the eastern diamondback rattlesnake. Which can eat a a timber rattlesnake. I mean, we're talking about size. There's two totally different snakes for sure.
Timber rattler is smaller.
Yeah,
for the most part.
And there have been cases of 6 footers. All snakes are 6 feet, aren't they? All snakes are 6 feet. But there's
if you hold it close enough to the camera, then
fishermen have made a career off it.
That's right. I'm guilty.
Holding a brim up and it's a great white shark.
That's right.
But the timber rattlesnakes are holding their own in Mississippi. They're a species of concern by the biologists who study the non-game species in Mississippi. It's a species of concern, but they're holding their own. Okay. They're holding their own. Over 50 years, I've seen 200 of them.
Okay.
And but I say holding their own. The main reason is habitat. If the habitat has changed, the wildlife's changed.
Sure.
Eastern diamondbacks are a species of concern, and they are a potential candidate by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for protection as a threatened species, which means we wouldn't be seeing those pictures on Facebook of people holding up their dead rattlesnakes. But they like nice, open, big sky country, savanna country, the same as bobwhite quail do. So by preserving habitat for bobwhite quail, now people may not like to hear this, but you're preserving habitat for diamondbacks and pine snakes and coach whips and gopher tortoises and myriad other animals, So habitat is very, very important.
Very important.
So, yeah.
Chip, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to comment. You said that you found some coral snakes, and I was talking to Emily, I like to refer to her as the snake lady over at the museum.
She's our state herpetologist.
Yeah. She was telling me that coral snakes are actually pretty rare.
They're quite rare. They're quite rare, and they seem to be localized. I've collected one at Leaf River, and I've had 12, 15 brought to me over the years. Picayune.
Really?
You want coral snakes? Go to Picayune.
Okay.
It's one of our area managers, Colt Mooney, is a crackerjack herpetologist, snake expert, and he's on. He lives on one of the management areas down around Pearl River County there, and he's dying to get a coral snake, and I got 2 down there. So I have to. He's very jealous of that. But usually people are mostly interested in the venomous snakes. Mm-hmm. They want to know how to identify them. They want to know what to do if they see one. And frankly, your average person, your average hunter fisherman, they really don't know much about snakes. And I'm not trying to be insulting. They're just not herpetologists. And snakes are so enveloped in myth and legend and stories. And, we hear the story about the fellow who drives his car off into a ditch and crashes in the creek in the ditch, and the cottonmouths coming there biting him all over, lonesome dove,
right.
And then the paramedics, they can't get close because the snakes are chasing them back and they can't get to. Well, Paul Harvey picked that up for his radio program, and people heard that nationwide. Never happened. Mm-hmm. Never happened. And we hear so many of these stories, and we just have to investigate them.
Sure.
But understanding the animal and understanding the organism really, really helps. And when people talk about, I got chased by a snake, or I cut a snake in half and it went back together again and crawled down a hole. These are stories that go back to Benjamin Franklin. Yeah, sure. Except that Benjamin Franklin liked snakes and actually wrote something about how the timber rattlesnake up in Pennsylvania was such a wonderful thing, and he would never harm one. And so even back then in the 1700s, there were forward-thinking people who understood. Fanny Cook, who founded the Natural Science Museum, our book that's coming up is dedicated to her as for her achievements and for a lady who thought snakes were just fine. And she wrote the very first rudimentary guides to the snakes of Mississippi.
A type of snake that comes up seems to, in a lot of the conversations I've been around, is the king snake, or it's called the king snake. Mm-hmm. And the idea of it being something that might actually protect your yard from venomous snakes, and that it's a good snake to have around.
Yeah.
Where do you fall
Good
on
snakes and bad snakes.
Yeah, good snakes, bad
All snakes are good. King snakes are known. They occur over the entire United States.
Okay.
And in one form or another. And king snakes are called king snakes because they kill and eat other snakes. They are immune to the bite of our pit vipers, our rattlesnake. If a king snake grabs a copperhead, wraps him up, he's killing him, the copperhead bites him, nothing much happens. A little puffiness, a little oozing. Doesn't slow him down a bit, and they eat him. But lots of snakes eat snakes. A snake is a perfect meal for a snake. It fits inside very nicely.
That's true.
But king snakes, they eat all kinds of things. They eat rats and mice and frogs and lizards and all kinds of things. And they do eat snakes for sure. They're not going to protect your yard because of what we know as carrying capacity. Your property has the capacity to support a certain amount of wildlife. And if there's too much of any one type, they're gonna die off. They're gonna starve, whatever. If they're, and so there's a balance there. And if you bring a king snake in and put him in your yard, well, you've already got king snakes, and that king snake's either going to get beat up by the other king snakes, or he's going to run off, or somebody's going to get run off, and you're going to end up with the same number of king snakes you had in the first place.
Okay.
So, but because Grandpa saw a king snake in the barn killing a copperhead and eating it. Well, that's a true story, and it goes out and gets expounded upon. Indigo snakes, black runners, black racers, coach whip snakes, cottonmouths. A large percentage of the cottonmouth's diet is other snakes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
And on my 7.5 acres down by Terry, we have a tiny little pond, twice as big as our studio here, chock full of cottonmouths. No water snakes.
Okay.
No water snakes at all. And so, but at Lake Washington up in the Delta, almost no cottonmouths there. It's water snakes by the tens of thousands. And in all my years, I've seen one cottonmouth up there. And then one of the grab you one guys. One of those guys got bit. He's actually in our book because he reached down, tried to pick one up with his hands, and it bit him.
Yeah.
So we have pictures. King snakes are popular snakes. And if the story of the king, and they do eat other snakes. They eat venomous snakes, but they eat all kinds of snakes.
Okay.
They'll even eat other king snakes. But if that belief, which is a true belief, is enough to keep people from killing king snakes, hey, so be it. That's
So
good.
be it.
Yeah.
Number ballpark of snakes that you've held in your hands in your lifetime? Thousands?
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands.
Oh gosh. Yeah. There's no way to, now the next question is, how many of them bit you?
Right. Have you ever been bitten? You knew I was going there.
I've raced NASCAR and hit the wall a couple times.
Okay.
Tell
me about it.
Well, as a teenager, I was bitten by every time that I was bitten 3 times, and every time was what we're going to call keeper error. I was catching a snake and messed up. And then, I was bitten at the Jackson Zoo in 1981. It was a serious bite. And, but they're all serious, but this was a pretty serious bite. And, nobody that deals with snakes, especially venomous snakes, is ever proud of taking a bite.
Sure.
At least they shouldn't be. And, but when you deal with them in such vast numbers, that sooner or later, your attention is drawn to something. Mm-hmm. And I have trouble with attention anyway. I'll be talking to you and a ladybug will go by, and now I'm in ladybug mode, and you'll have to snap your fingers a couple times. But, it's a painful experience. It's expensive. It can be debilitating. And really not so much me getting bit by a snake. What about people in Mississippi who get bit by snakes? We know that across the United States, with the exception of one physician, and we don't need to go there, but he disagrees. But papers have been written, and physicians, emergency room physicians, will tell you that people get bit while messing with snakes.
Yeah,
they see a snake, they try to kill it, And I've interviewed many snake bite patients. They're not victims, they're patients. And I asked them, how did you get bit? It just jumped out and bit me. But their buddies in the waiting room, and they go, nah, that's not what happened at all. That's not what happened at all. So nobody ever thinks they're going to get bit by a snake when they're trying to kill it. They're thinking they're going to avoid being bitten by getting rid of this thing because it's going to come back and it's going to bite a child or a dog or something. And that's just not the case. But they get down there and they start trying to kill it. They shoot it and then they pick it up for a picture. And people get bit by dead snakes all the time. It's embarrassing. And, so, that's the last place you want to go is messing with a venomous snake. Take 2 steps back, walk away. You can't kill a snake unless you can see a snake. So if there was a law that said that you could kill a snake if you felt that your life was in danger, if there was such a law, it wouldn't work because you can't see it. Now you can't kill it unless you can see it. So once you see it, you back away. Now you are no longer in danger.
Yeah.
So if you kill it, you break the law. And I'm just saying that's just an example of a situation. Just get away from it. If you're walking along and you look down and suddenly there's a big rattlesnake right at your ankle, you're not going to shoot from the hip. You're going to jump back. Yeah. And then you're going to make a conscious decision to shoot it or chop it or do something. And that's when you get bit. Alcohol figures into 40 to 50% of all snake bites.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, it does. And we can joke and laugh about that. But, alcohol will make us do things that we shouldn't do. And very often we are the architects of our own misfortune. We lean too far on the ladder. I can reach that. I can reach that. And then you fall and break your neck. We do things and we hurt ourselves. And so, but it's deeply, deeply ingrained.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get people to stop,
Now you've written a book.
Yeah. It's I was a much younger man when we started. We started writing a book back around 1981 or so. And a good friend of mine who was a herpetologist who worked for St. Regis Paper Company, Bill Harrington, and I started working on this. And then he got transferred and left and kind of got interested in other things. And so, but a good friend of mine from Southern Illinois University, he and I went to school together, calls me on the phone one day and he says, "Is this Terry?" And I said it was. And he had taken a position at University Medical Center in Jackson. And the game was afoot, and we decided we were going to take this and run with it. And we've done various things with it over the years. And we finally came up with a plan that looks like it's going to work. And the title of the book is Mississippi Snakes, Their Identification, Natural History, and Influence on the Culture of the Magnolia State. And we've been talking a little bit about culture here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, what we have: Choctaws, we have Vietnamese, we have Chinese, we have Hispanics, we have all these cultures in Mississippi. We have South Louisiana people that have relocated here. They all look at snakes differently. And then, of course, there's the myths and legends and how people respond to snakes and living with snakes around your house. Do you want to live with snakes? If you don't, then let's try these things. And so it's not a field guide, but it's much more than that. But University Press of Mississippi is who's doing it. And if everything goes right, we'll be looking at having a copy sitting here on the table a year from this upcoming August. So August 26th.
Oh boy.
So they like to do it. They like to publish in Canada, but I'm not sure that that's going to happen. Sometimes political climates can interfere with this kind of thing. But they're excited about it. We're excited about it. And the thing is, over the years, dealing with the public in Mississippi and meeting so many people, the most common question is there a book? There ought to be a book. Mm-hmm. And so we decided we would do it. Yeah. And so it'll have about 375 color photographs. It'll have maps showing distribution, probably about 400 pages in the end. So.
Wow.
we're excited.
So it'll be a great educational tool.
Yes,
for those that have their.
It's written for everybody.
Okay.
It's written for academics. It's written for the lady that finds a snake in her garden. And it's light. It's light. When the subject of snakes chasing people comes up, we point out that we're a couple old guys. We wish they would chase us because we're going to break a hip trying to run one down. And but it's light. We have lots of interesting quotations and fun stuff all through it. We've got a picture of snake poop. We have a color photograph of snake poop because people constantly ask me. They say, "I think I have a snake in my garage. I think there's a snake in my garage." And I go, "How do you know?" "Well, I've been seeing poop, but I don't know what snake poop." This is something that comes up all the time. And we said, this is going to be a first.
Yeah.
We're going to put a picture of snake poop in our book.
Why not?
Why
in
not?
The snake book.
Yeah. It's so
well, and I'm thinking about some of the anecdotal evidences you talked about earlier of stories that sort of grow their own legs over the years. It almost sounds like you sit here in 2025 still seeing sort of, the landscape of us, everyday homeowner, yard owner, citizen, outdoorsman, as we need to continue to learn kind of collectively more about snakes so that we can identify and understand them better.
Well, when you stop learning, you die, right? You got to keep learning. And this, I don't want to dwell on this book. I mean, it's not even close to being, it's done, but it's not close to being published. It's going to have a lot of pretty pictures in it. A lot of colored pictures, and people may not read the book, but they'll flip through and look at the pictures and go, "That's it. That's the one I saw." And then if they want to go ahead and read about it, they can. So, but I would think that, we tell our children, look both ways. Don't stick a fork in the toaster. Don't pet strange dogs. Danger, stranger. We teach them these rules to stay safe, but we don't teach them anything about snakes except bad snake, kill it. Run away, bad snake, awful, evil, so, and it's not that difficult. You don't have to know if the snake is venomous or not. You don't have to know anything about it. All you have to do is, once you see it, is simply step away.
Step away.
It has no feet. It can't chase you, contrary to what we hear all the time. No snake has ever chased a person. Is this a call-in show?
I don't think so.
I hope not.
At least not yet, Terry.
But people talk about it and they misinterpret snake behavior. A snake crawling in your direction does not constitute a chase. But it's an old myth. It's been around forever. And I just, you have to be delicate and diplomatic when you talk to somebody about that. And if they're willing to learn and kind of slap their forehead and say, "I could have had a V8, and think for a second, they go, yeah, he has no legs. His top speed is 3 miles an hour. If you're afraid of being chased by a snake and you can't do better than 3 miles an hour, you need to work out.
Yeah.
Right. So, and if you're an outdoors person and you, whether it be, kayaking or deer hunting or whatever you like to do in the outdoors, seems to me you need to know a little bit about snakes, and understanding them will take you a long way to being safe.
Yeah.
And because that's why you need to know about them so you don't get hurt.
Yeah.
So,
Terry, it's really a pleasure to get to meet you, get a chance to talk to you. I find myself wishing that I could sit in on one of your presentations. But you say you're retired from public speaking. Is that right?
Yeah. I still get a lot of calls and, to come out and give talks. And so, I usually refer them to somebody that I trust, somebody that's going to do a good job. And so, were you talking about the kingsnake earlier?
The kingsnake, I think that's what I asked you about.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
There's a kingsnake.
There he is. Chip, it's a first. We've got an actual kingsnake in the studio.
Black on top, little white polka dots all over him. This is a speckled kingsnake. If you get way up into Tishomingo County, they're almost solid black.
Really?
And they're called Eastern black kingsnakes.
Okay.
And this is a youngster here, about 30 inches long, I guess. The biggest I've gotten was right at 5, and that's probably one out of hundreds and hundreds.
Now, did you find this?
This was born at my house. It was born in captivity. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't keep very many snakes these days, but I keep a few for these sorts of things, you know. And so, and he's a reptile. He's not necessarily, he's cold-blooded, but he's not necessarily cold. He takes on the temperature of surroundings. So if it's really cold air conditioning in here, after a while, his temperature will go down.
Really?
But they're not totally at the mercy of they can actively move from one spot to another, from a warm spot to a cool spot, to maintain an average temperature. Mm-hmm. They're not slimy. Nothing comes off on your hands when you touch a snake.
Yeah.
And he's flicking his tongue there. His entire existence is based on chemistry. He smells everything around him. He analyzes everything in nature with his tongue.
Okay.
And this guy right here, if we had a little copperhead, we could have a Disney movie right here on the table. He would eat a copperhead.
He would eat it right away.
Yeah. I don't do that, but yeah, in a flash, he wouldn't hesitate. And there, and let's go back to that for a second about king snakes around the property. What we do know is that if given the choice between a 2-foot long, fat, healthy copperhead, heavy bodied, and a 2-foot long, skinny, big as a straw green snake, which one's he going to take?
Well, I guess the fatter one, I would think.
Yeah. More bang for your buck,
More
right?
bang for your effort. Yeah,
absolutely. He'll use pretty much the same amount of energy output to eat the bigger one than the little one, and so why not eat the big one? He's not here saying, I'm going to protect humanity. That's not his job. But we see it and we say, oh, good snake.
Yeah.
Right. So, there
the coloration. Okay. And you said that, so he's raised in captivity, central Mississippi. You said you go further north, like
if you get into the Tennessee hills, right there,
Tisch County,
Tishomingo County, they're almost black. They have a few dots.
I wonder why that is.
Well, it's what we call subspecies. It's just a race of one species. In Florida, in South Florida, these things are almost white because of the white sand and the coral. And then in the Carolinas, they're black and they have cross bands that look like links of chain. And local people call them chain snakes or chain king snakes. Mississippi has speckled king snakes. And people will call me and say, there's a snake in my yard. He's 3 feet long and he's as big as round as a quarter and he's green. Well, that snake's not green.
No, not green.
But you put him in the sun, yellow polka dots on a black background in the sun. When he moves, those blend together and they turn green.
Okay.
So this guy does very well in grass, or in green vegetation.
Yeah, I would guess
so. And they, in some parts of America, king snakes have mysteriously disappeared. But luckily in Mississippi, king snakes are still quite common. We still see king snakes on Facebook that have their heads chopped off. Yeah. And, unfortunately, people often will come on and condemn that person. Don't you realize? And that doesn't help.
Sure.
That doesn't help. You need to, say, wow, sorry that happened. Here, let me tell you a little bit about king snakes and maybe it won't happen again. So, but they again, rats, mice, all kinds of things. We point out that snakes help people by eating rats and mice, and they do. But really, if you look at all snake species in the world, only a few of them eat rats and mice. Most, of all those other ones, they eat lizards, they eat frogs, they eat invertebrates and fish and things. But in Mississippi, most of our larger snakes, rat snakes, black racers, coach whips, our venomous snakes, they do eat a lot of rats and mice for sure. And cottonmouths never had a friend, and yet. What do? Well, they're pretty slow. They're not the fastest snake by any means. This is probably the slowest snake in Mississippi. But what do they eat? Well, they eat a lot of sick fish, diseased fish, and by removing fish that can't get away, they're ill, and they catch those and eat them, and they help keep the environment clean and disease free. So even a cottonmouth, the most hated, feared, misunderstood snake He's mean, he's vicious, he's ugly, he stinks, and all these things. And yet he's just out there making a living like everybody else.
The cottonmouth.
Cottonmouth. Yeah. Everybody hates a cottonmouth. And my wife said one day, I said, you want to move him off the road? And she got out with her little snake stick and went over and coaxed him off the road. And she came back and said, the reputation of the cottonmouth is greatly exaggerated. And it is. We apply human characteristics to a non-human thing.
Yeah, sure.
He can't change the expression. That's the expression he had when he was born.
Yeah. He
just, to you and me, he looks mean.
Yeah.
He opens that mouth. Ooh, when you're walking along and you're going out to your duck blind, and if you're in boggy ground and everything's wet and dark, and the cottonmouth is dark colored, and he's there, and maybe you're about to step on him, he pops that mouth open. And it's happened to me 1,000 times. And you go, what was that? And there he is grinning at you with his mouth wide open. And that white mouth against the dark background of the snake and the dark background of the habitat is a flash signal. And I have, more times than I should probably admit, have stuck the toe of my boot or my shoe right in their mouth, and they don't bite down. They move aside and they open their mouth again. Now, people don't do that.
Not recommended.
Don't send your lawyers. But the point is, no snake wants to bite you. They bite in self-defense. They bite when they're attacked. They sometimes bite when they're stepped upon, although we find that even then, that they rarely bite when they're stepped upon. They generally will stay still and quiet and just wait until this big thing has gotten off them. And I stood for 3 minutes on a copperhead, couldn't find him. I'm looking for him. I know he's here somewhere. Snakes will release a smell when they're threatened, like a skunk.
Yeah.
You can't smell snakes in the woods. People tell you they can. You don't smell snakes in the woods. You only smell a snake if he's injured, frightened, alarmed, and he'll release a musk, which is defensive. And so I could smell it. So I knew he was upset. I couldn't find him. And then I realized I was standing on him. And there was, a foot of him on one side of my foot and a foot of him on the other. Wow. And I rocked back on my shoe. I didn't jump or anything. I just rocked back, and he crawled out about 3 or 4 feet. And I remember him looking back and going, "What the heck?" I do remember. But he could have bitten me at any time. But I have walked within striking distance. I've sat down inadvertently right next to venomous snakes. I've put my hands next to them when I didn't mean to. And I've been in so many situations where I was right there. And of thousands of venomous snakes from Canada, across the United States, through Mexico, the Caribbean, Central America, and in the Amazon where they have real snakes. And I've never one time had a snake strike at me as I passed. Now, when you are catching them or photographing them or messing with them, they get upset for sure. But I've never had one strike when I stepped on one or as I passed. But we know they do. I'm not trying to say I'm not trying to defend snakes to the point of ridiculousness. That's not the case. Snakebite is a very, very major issue in third world countries. And, in sub-Saharan Africa, it's a big deal, and people tend not to take it seriously. But in the United States, we're lucky. We have good medical care. We have good transportation. We all carry a phone. Your best snakebite kit in the world is your phone and a set of car keys. Mind your manners when you're out there. Watch where you're going. Don't let it ruin a day. You're going out to enjoy nature. Don't let the thought of maybe seeing a snake ruin your day. And live and let live. Your hunting license is for a deer, right?
Right. That's right.
So and I'm being a little facetious there, but we don't. You can get along. We can change our behavior. We didn't wear seatbelts. Now we do. You smoke cigarettes. Now we don't. That kind of thing. We can change our behavior, and for the better. Sure. Sorry, I get long-winded.
No, that's great. Well, and I just appreciate the show and tell also.
Yeah. Well, we can. I don't know how much time we have.
You got another one?
Sure.
So I'm guessing it's not another king snake. That's
no. And I didn't. I do have a a cottonmouth at home and I have a copperhead at home, and they're only there to be photographed. The cottonmouth, I walked into my shop a week or so ago, and I noticed something go behind the anvil, and I thought it was a lizard. They come and shop all the time. And I walked over, and it was a 3-foot cottonmouth grinning at me. And he'd come up from the pond. And I said, okay. And I went and got a bucket, and I lifted him with an instrument up into the bucket. And I said, now you get your picture taken. So, but I didn't have any means of bringing those, to a podcast.
Sure.
So,
and not that I'm deathly afraid of a cottonmouth, but I appreciate you not bringing it in here.
Just stay away from them.
Now this is a beautiful snake.
Yeah. This is a corn snake. Wow. Dr. Clyburn, who's probably the grandfather of Mississippi herpetology down at Southern in Hattiesburg, he called them red chicken snakes.
Okay.
Red chicken snakes. And a corn snake is a type of rat snake, which is our gray rat snake in Mississippi is most commonly called a chicken snake.
Okay.
And we all know why. They get in hen houses, eat the eggs and things. Well, this snake belongs to the same genus. It is a rat snake. And the corn snake it's pretty. It's got nice colors, but unfortunately they're slaughtered pretty much across the board. First, they're a snake, so they get killed. Secondly, people look at them and say, well, that's a copperhead.
Right, because it's a little bit more of a
reddish colors.
Reddish color on the head. There.
Yeah, and so whereas it looks nothing like a copperhead at all. It doesn't have the body shape. It doesn't have the colors or the pattern. And copperheads in Mississippi don't have copperheads. The copperhead name came from New England, the Pilgrims and such in New England. Those northern copperheads in the Appalachians and things have distinctly set off red heads, and our southern copperheads don't.
What the southern copperhead has? How would you describe the color?
Grayish tan with cross bands, and for 300 years we've called those hourglasses, meaning narrow at the back and wide on both sides, or saddlebags. But now with the internet and everybody in the world on the internet, people call them Hershey's Kisses. They look at the side, and it's wide, and it narrows and goes up like a Hershey's Kiss. Yeah. And to an old herpetologist, I just want to spit. But if it works. Yeah. But it, like I say, now at the Natural Science Museum, there is a poster you can buy. And I did that poster 25 years ago, but it's a poster of the venomous snakes of Mississippi. Right. So you can go down there. It's a good reason to go, spend a day.
If that's what gets circulated around on social media, like on Facebook. We'll see a picture of that poster every now and then.
Oh yeah.
It's always really interesting.
And it is. I actually made it into a webpage, and we just updated it on the website.
And so that's the poster.
Yeah, the department puts it out. Yeah.
And I think they actually have a new poster now that has like more than just the venomous snakes on it too.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew that Emily was working on a poster. I've not heard from her about that. But
how common is this corn snake in Mississippi?
They're relatively common. They're not found in the Delta. They're found all over the state, but they're not found in the Delta. Different habitat. Yeah. And so, but relatively common. Rat snakes are much more common. You'll see 10 to 1 over these. But they're interesting because while they're perfectly harmless and they're a real popular pet in the United States, they when they're threatened, they will bow up and they'll make a big exaggerated triple striking coil. And when they do that, suddenly this black and white checkerboard comes into view.
Look at that.
And you don't see that until he does that.
Yeah.
And when he does that, that causes confusion. That where you had a snake, suddenly there's this other thing going on, and it confuses the predator and hopefully helps the snake save his life. Yeah. Snakes have a lot of different methods for defending themselves. The number one best method that most snakes use is to freeze in place. Freeze, let that natural camouflage take over. Snakes like black racers, black runners, most people call them black racers, ribbon snakes and such, they'll run. They'll get the jump on you and they'll run and try to get out of there. Bluffing, a hognose snake, spread natter is what people call those. Hognose snakes will spread their necks and they'll look like a cobra, and they blow and they hiss and they make all kinds of noises and they try to scare you away when in fact they don't even bite. They simply do not bite people. You can hold one. No one's ever been bitten. But But if that doesn't work, and he knows that you're not, it's not working, they flop over on their back and they play possum.
Really?
Yeah, they roll over and they go through the death throes.
That's plan B.
Yeah, they throw up a frog and blood comes out of their mouth, and they play possum. They conk out. You can pick them up. They're as limp as a noodle. And after a little while, if it's all's good, they'll kind of look around, roll their eyes around and roll over and take off. So that other snakes, like our local mud snakes, are shiny black. They're aquatic. They're shiny black, brilliant red bars on their belly. They'll roll over and put their tails in the air and make a false head. They'll hide their head, but they'll put their tail up and wave it around and kind of strike with their tail. And all these brilliant colors come into view, and that confuses enemies.
Yeah.
And then our venomous snakes tend to freeze. Then if that doesn't work, they try to run away. And if that doesn't work, then, if you get them cornered up and you don't give them an opportunity to get away, then they only have one thing left to do to save their lives. Mm-hmm. Rattlesnakes will sometimes rattle to let you know they're there. Of about 200 rattlesnakes in Mississippi that I've observed in nature, one has rattled at me. The rattlesnake who rattles is a dead rattlesnake.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if he gives himself away, If he gives himself away, he's going to get killed. And this is not, the snake isn't thinking this. It's just a natural thing. Stay quiet, stay still, blend in with nature, and let this big scary thing walk on by.
So in a way, am I right then that a lot of like Hollywood has had a lot to do with that misconception over the years?
Well, we mentioned Lonesome Dove a few minutes ago.
Lonesome Dove,
the absolute best Western that's ever been made in the world. And what did they do in like the first episode? They're crossing the creek up in Wyoming somewhere where there's no cottonmouths, and a swarm of cottonmouths gets the guy and bites him all over and kills him. Yeah. Never happened. Yeah. And Larry McMurtry, who wrote the book and was involved in the movie, he must have believed that was true. He had heard it. And must have believed it. We're a funny animal ourselves.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we are.
I think the corn snake likes your voice, Terry. As you were talking, he just kind of relaxed and sat still. It's almost like he was listening.
I think my voice is a little high. I'm from the Midwest, and people still on the phones call me ma'am. But in fact, snakes have no ears, but they do have internal ear parts, and they can hear very low tones, very low bass tones, and bold vibrations. They can pick up on that. And
so you're saying that because of that, therefore he may not actually hear your voice?
Yeah, he's probably not hearing me. But if a baritone came in and started singing Old Man River, he might pick up on some of that. And I don't know if he likes Mozart or the Stones. I don't know. But they've put snakes in zero sensory chambers where there was no temperature, no sound, no light. And they played music to them, and they would respond. They'd move, they'd twitch, they'd flick that tongue, get that tongue going. What's that? What's that? So I think when you're walking through the woods, they probably don't hear you. I walk up on snakes and I think, gosh, that was easy. Yeah. And people say, well, we'll make a lot of vibrations, walk hard and scare the snakes away. If anything, that just makes them freeze, in place and not run away. But it's just not that big a matter. It depends on your own nature, of course, but it's just not that big a thing.
One, kind of parting message for people listening regarding snakes in Mississippi, and if you're outdoors, what's sort of you've touched on it in many different ways. What's the overall message in terms of your message to us and the public about interacting with snakes where we live?
Well, don't miss out on the outdoors. Go outside. Don't be afraid to go out there. And don't let it rule your day. We have snakes. We live in Mississippi. But if you do see one, there's two things you can do. You can count yourself lucky and enjoy the experience. Take a picture with your cell phone. Send me a picture.
Great.
I get them all the time. Or take 2 steps back and walk away. At 2 paces, no snake in Mississippi can hurt you.
That's great.
The biggest rattlesnake that ever lived can't hurt you at 2 paces. So take 2 steps back, live and let live, and enjoy the Magnolia State. All right.
Terry, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
He is herpetologist and snake expert Terry Vandeventer on the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you outdoors.